Attention. You guys are now on.
On? Okay. You put the wide angle inside now.
Made it all beautiful. Just
Oh, yeah, 20 years off and 25. Thank you. When we hit it.
Yeah.
1 minute.
Some chairs, please. Yeah, look at my bones are creaking. Well, how old is she? She's creaking.
All right, about 30 seconds. 30 seconds.
All right. Welcome once again to Seattle Here and Now on Rainier Avenue Radio .world. A very special show with a very special guest. We are broadcasting live today, and our very special guest is Chief Carmen Best, recently appointed to the Seattle Police Department. No longer will there be an asterisk behind her name or a acting or interim designation. She is, in fact, our Chief of Police, Seattle Police Department, confirmed by the Seattle City Council in the early part of August, unanimously, I will also say. And today she's joining us with my co-host, Carly Summers.
Great to be here.
Chief, thank you very much. I mean, your schedule has got to be, I mean, you must have 2 or 3 people keeping track of your schedule, because we are so honored and humbled the fact that you're going to give us the time to spend on our show. And we thought that in honor of that we wanted to do it live. So there.
Well, John, thank you for having me. I do appreciate it very much. Busy schedules, never too busy for you and all the hospitality that you provided. So I'm really happy to be here with you and Carly today to talk about whatever issues you deem important.
Well, my issue is it's great to have you as the chief. There's no acting, there's no interim, there's no, like I said, an asterisk at the end of your name. And that's got to be, it's got to be a fulfilling moment for you.
It certainly is. Let me just say I'm really thrilled to be the permanent police chief. It was a little bit of a journey to get here, but now that I'm here, I'm not looking back. I'm looking forward. I'm really excited about where the organization can go and how we can better serve the community. So it's a real honor.
Well, you have a force of, 1,800 employees, 1,300, I think, are officers. So you have somewhere around that?
We're closer to authorized 1,400 just about, and another almost 600 civilian employees. So we're really close to 2,000 people within the organization.
And to serve a city of about almost 750,000 730,000 residents in the city of Seattle. And you just formed your team. And I had a chance to, well, I know a couple of them, but can you just briefly give us a little bit, who they are, if you can?
Sure. So we had some positions shift and change. I promoted 2 people recently. We have 2 other positions that are assistant chief positions that we're advertising, national advertising for people to fill those positions. And we have some interim chiefs in place, both of whom are highly capable. But we wanted to make sure we give everybody an opportunity to apply for what is a really demanding but rewarding position. So 2 people that I promoted, first was Deputy Chief Mark Green. He's over 20-year veteran of the department, well-versed, has had a number of assignments, a really smart guy. He cares about the community, cares about the officers. He showed me an incredible amount of dedication and commitment to the mission of the organization. And I couldn't be happier about having him really as my right-hand person in the organization. Very thrilled about it. And of course, the other person is our assistant chief, Chief Adrian Diaz. I've worked closely with him for a number of years. I don't know a person that I can think of that has worked harder for the community members in Seattle. He cares about young people. He cares about the community. He cares about safety. He has dedicated a vast amount of his career to engaging with community members. I don't think there's an area in the city that I've been to where people haven't met him, talked to him, or haven't been touched by one of the programs that he has worked so hard to get in place. So I couldn't be more happy to have a person like that on the command staff. And then for the other two folks who are interim, and that's Chief Deanna Nolet and Chief Steve Herjack, again, both well qualified, very capable, and we'll definitely hold down the fort until we make a permanent decision, assuming that both of them will apply for those positions as well.
That's great. I mean, I personally know Adrian and worked with him, and actually we ate hot dogs together over the Garfield Community Center a couple of years ago. So, and that's great. Really, really well respected in the community, and the kids really love him. So, with that in mind, we have you're operating organization, a department. You have 5 precincts:
Yes.
north, south, southwest, east, and west. My question is, at one point in time, there was a discussion about putting and building another precinct, but someplace, I guess geographically speaking, somewhere in the central area. Is that never came to
Yeah,
fruition?
I haven't heard any discussion of that in particular. Right now, we're really focusing on what we're going to do for our North Precinct, and specifically, as you know, we were trying to get a new precinct built, and that effort didn't make it through, but we're hopeful that we can get something done up north. The North Precinct, the area that it covers, if it was by itself, it would be the second largest city in the state.
Wow.
It's a very large area. It needs a lot of attention in terms of public safety attention, and we want to make sure that we can house the number of officers that we need to house there. The precinct was built in 1984, made to hold 150 people. We have well out capacity that facility right now, so we really need to have something done to have a facility that will house enough officers that they can make a positive change, a positive difference in the North Precinct.
So you're a 26-year plus veteran of the Seattle Police Department. You grew up locally, Tacoma. You're one of our own, we'll say. Well, we'll extend to Tacoma, T-Town.
I have family here too,
Well,
but it's all together. We're all together.
But that is what I think the community was so enamored about, the fact that you are one of us. We'll say it literally, one of us. And that's why it was so, I'll say we were so pleased and happy that you were appointed. Of course, this is the honeymoon period. There are going to be bumps in the road, and I know recently reading the article about your recent administrative action against 2 officers. You had to terminate them. We're not going to talk about that because there may be some other issues involved, but salient to that. But that I think kind of strikes a chord with the community, saying that she just steps into the job, but she does what she needs to do, and that was really, basically, that is a tough decision to make. I know.
Yeah, it is a tough decision, but every decision will be guided by our policies, our procedures, things that are ethical, moral, and fair, and that we hold ourselves accountable, and we just deal with the facts as we know them, and we deal with the truth. And as long as we're doing that, I think we're going to be fine. And most people will recognize and support you if they know that you're dealing with the truth and that you're making honest and fair decisions.
Well, that's great.
Yeah, well, and we've been talking about, and I just want to say thank you again for being here. We're thrilled to have you. So,
thank you, Carly.
Talking about the numbers and how many people we have out on the street and kind of on the administrative side, maybe we can talk a little bit about recruiting and sort of, do we need more police?
I would love to talk about recruiting, and yes, we do need more police. We are actively recruiting. I'd be remiss if I didn't mention it. We definitely want more officers coming onto the police department, and we absolutely want more officers that reflect the community that we serve. We want women, we want LGBTQ, we want any demographic that is in the city. We want them to be on the police department representing the city. so that we can provide that service and that level of cultural competency and awareness and build confidence and faith in the community that there's representation here.
Would you say there's some difficulty in recruiting people in the area who can afford to live in Seattle and police the community that they're living in because of the cost of living?
I don't think it would surprise anybody. I think it's well documented that the cost of living in Seattle is rising and it's already high. But I don't think that we are outpriced out of living in the city, although now less than half of the officers actually live in the city, but that could be for a whole host of different reasons. So yeah, there's certainly economic factors will have an impact.
What do you think the benefits are to having folks who come from the neighborhoods they're serving? Does that serve this kind of bigger theme, or seems to be a bigger theme, which is this community policing idea?
The idea behind community policing is that we are doing problem solving, that we're working with the neighbors on the issues that they identify, and I'll talk a little bit more about our micro community policing plans as we go further into the conversation. So that's the thing. I've gone to a number of places where we've talked about, is it important that officers live in the community that they work? And many people feel like that it is, but research has shown that if you're committed to your profession, you're committed to safety, you're committed to people, your personal residence isn't going to have a bearing on the quality of service that you provide to the area where you work. That may surprise folks, so that's what the research has shown. And I absolutely believe that people, whether they live in the city or don't live in the city, people who are hardworking, who are civic-minded, who want to give back to the community, who want to serve, this is a place for them, whether their home is here or not.
Mm-hmm. What are the things, I guess, on both sides that you're doing in the department or plan to be doing in the department? And on our side, what can community members be doing to sort of bridge any gaps right now in that relationship?
So it's twofold for me. Just on the individual level, I talk to officers all the time, and I say every interaction is an opportunity to build a relationship and a bridge. Every interaction, that's even when you arrest people. You can arrest people respectfully in a way that doesn't cause additional friction or tension or show a bad light on the police department. So every interaction is an opportunity to build a bridge and build a relationship. That's just on a daily basis. But also, we want to be really intentional and deliberate about engaging with community and bringing them in. When I was sworn in at the Northwest African American Museum, one of the things that I mentioned as I was talking to the group that was there was that if the only time you talk to a police officer is when you are in trouble or something's gone wrong, then we really have failed in what we want to do. We want to be a part of the community, daily, a part of the community, working with the community, not apart from the community. So that means the interactions and our connection has to be more than just at times of crisis. It should be at times of, when good things are happening too, right? When we're
Block party, right?
Yeah, block parties or parades or special cultural events or all those things. We should be a part of that, right? As well as the other things that we're dealing with. Officers honestly are dealing with, poverty, homelessness, mental health crisis, and all of the tragedy and unpredictability that is inherent in the professional policing every single day. So it's a tough job in some ways, but it's also a job that can be rewarding when you give back. But it's even more rewarding when you are trusted and you're part of the community that you're serving.
And known, right. Well, and John and I have talked frequently about how the way the police department in any city interacts with its citizens and the people who are being policed, if you will, that if the officer's arriving on a scene of something going wrong, know the kids involved or know the people involved. If you're responding to a DB call and you know the community or you know the people, it causes a different interaction, certainly, among all the people involved. And so
I would agree with that, absolutely. Knowing people makes a difference. It's, everything really is about relationships and how well we connect. In so many facets, not just in policing, but in other areas too, but certainly knowing people and having relationships and understanding and having, even if you don't know them personally, just having a sense of cultural awareness certainly helps with that interaction. And we always want to be able to do that.
Well, and I would be remiss if I didn't mention that, you know, the department's operating under a consent decree.
Mhm.
And so people in the community obviously have this on their minds. Maybe you can talk a little bit about how things we're touching on now will help stay in compliance, will help with issues of policing a diverse group of people in a diverse city or diverse areas of the city. How does the community relationship help with that?
Well, it's a big part of it. So we were declared in full and effective compliance back in January. So that means essentially that we met all of the initial metrics and requirements and measurements that were imposed by the federal court. But we still have a period, a 2-year period of what they call sustainment. Can you show us that you can hold on to these practices? But we don't even just want to hold on to, we want to show a culture, a continuous improvement, innovation, constantly working and getting better, making sure that our police department and the service we provide is evolving with the times, and that we're doing sort of the social contract theory, not to get too involved, but that we're doing the service that the community wants to see from the police department. When I came on 26 years ago, we weren't giving the lock zone to people. I mean, the thought of officers walking around with this, reversal medication and putting it in somebody's nose to revive them was not on our radar screen. But the times have changed, and it's an issue for us, and we are in the middle of, as the Surgeon General has mentioned, a crisis. So now the officers are carrying it. We now sit down and we talk to people. We have the peacekeeping circles, things that just didn't exist before that we're doing now because times have changed and we have to evolve with it. And that's really part of continuing effective policing.
Well, the term police officers are always in that group, first responders. They will always be part of that group. I wanted to kind of latch on to what we're talking about. The community commission, or was it Citizens Commission or Citizens?
Community Police Commission?
Yes, community police. Is that going to be continuing? Is it in your vision? Just what is going to be going on with that?
Well, the Community Police Commission was established at the early onset of the
Consent decree
process, and they are now a permanent body, and they will continue. They've increased their numbers. I don't know the exact number of commissioners, but there are somewhere near 20 commissioners that represent and reflect community issues. I think they act both as a conduit to community members to take in information from the community, but also to deliver information back to the community about police, police action and the way the police department is running. They also work with, there's an inspector general that's new, and we also have an OPA director, which is our Office of Professional Accountability. So there's a whole host of accountability entities that are in place to help moderate and regulate the accountability process of the police department.
Now, OPA, and my understanding is their role is to take complaints about the actions of a police officer. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And there's an investigative piece for that, and a finding, that kind of thing. So, okay, yeah, please, I appreciate that.
Yeah, well, and I guess that kind of continuing with that sort of line of this conversation. If there are issues out in the community with especially diverse groups of people, how you're in compliance, but folks may not know how you're what you're doing to comply. Is this kind of a soup to nuts effort from attracting the right people to be police officers, attracting diverse people to the force, diversifying the force? Is it from the start to the finish? What is it looking like?
I mean, in terms of making our organization one that, everything, just like you mentioned, everything. We want to get the right people in the seats. We want to make sure that we are, again, I mentioned this earlier, but making sure that we have a diverse community, diverse officers that reflect the community. We want to make sure that our training, our policies, our practices, our accountability, all make sure that the officers are doing the work that the community expects of us, that we are providing effective public service, excellent service to the people that we serve, and that we're also doing it in a way that helps resolve crime issues. We don't want to forget, I'll just mention my priorities, first and foremost, we're supposed to be reducing crime and disorder in the city. And with all of the other mandates that we have, we don't want to lose track or sight of the fact. That's our number one priority, is making sure that we reduce crime and disorder. We want to make sure that we're providing excellent service to the community. I mentioned that many, many times, but I can't overemphasize how important it is that the people know that the police department is a part of the community and not apart from the community, and that we're all in this together, and that we all have a role in protecting the areas that we live and make sure we have public safety. And we also want to make sure that we use data-driven practices and policies, that we know we have a whole host of technology at our fingertips to help us decide about deployments, types of calls for service, counting crime data, and that type of information. We want to make sure we utilize it to its fullest. We want to make sure that we're using appropriate business practices and streamlining how we, make purchases, the equipment that we're doing, that we're purchasing. We have about $353 million budget. The vast majority of that is spent on employee issues such as overtime and benefits and that kind of thing. So it's really a relatively small percentage of the budget that we can utilize for facilities, for equipment, for training. But all those things are vastly important. So we're taking care of all of those issues along the way to make sure that people have the confidence and the trust in the police department that they should.
And are those the types of actions that you're taking, for example, and I know you said there's limited budgets for these kinds of things, but one part of the consent decree that's still kind of out there and may always be an issue that we're dealing with both as a police department and as a society is that disproportionately people of color still are stopped more often. They, at least in my line of work, I'm an attorney, and they're prosecuted more often at the other end of things. So what specifically is the department doing or will be doing or expanding, what's
Sure.
happening on that front?
Sure, I've thought about that a lot. I'm actually part of a group of law enforcement professionals that are looking at reducing crime and incarceration, particularly those of Black and Brown. We know that, historically there was the arrest, 3 strikes you're out, arrest, and put people in jail. And what that really ended up with was a higher proportion of Black and Brown people in custody. So that was a failed ideology, if you will, for us going forward. So we want to make sure that we're doing things that really limit the amount of this. We still have disproportionality, and some of that's on the police department, but a lot of that is in various other areas of the criminal justice system, whether it's through, judges, corrections, defense, prosecution, all of those things. So we're going to try to take care of our piece of that. I believe that there's really a strong support for having diversion practices, and we try to, as much as possible, especially for those low-level offenses, divert people into other areas so that they're not a part of the criminal justice system and that they avoid incarceration, that we're not breaking up families unnecessarily for really small offenses, and giving people opportunity to have redemption and be viable members of the community. And so to that end, we work with law enforcement assisted diversion, we work with Veterans Court, we work with drug court, and just a whole host of other entities that are trying to divert people out of the system. We really recognize we're not going to rest away out of the problem. Those failed practices are still with us, and that's really important. And then we're working on any sort of intervention programs that we can get involved in that keep young people, on a good path. Because we know that once you're in the system, it's harder to get out of it. We want to make sure that we're part of the solution to that.
I was a member of the Minority Justice Commission of the courts in Washington State. People have to understand that it's not the arresting officer that charges the individual with the crime, it's the prosecuting attorney through that system. And so, and I think it speaks very much about what your area of concern is, how the officers interact, et cetera. Because what we also know is the most incidents that occur between citizens and police occurs when there's stops. And generally speaking, but there's thousands of those every day. So the few that get into the headlines are very tragic, and many of them are. But on the other side, there's thousands of them that go on every day. And it is the point that we think that paying attention, as you said, to the interaction, the competence issue. You mentioned cultural competence. I think that has a large part, and the affinity of working in the community. I think that's very important. I think that's a very good point you made. When we talk about the kind, and I'm going to ask this question, and you can hold off on that one. I looked at this thing called micro community policing. That I plead ignorance. What is micro community? I know what community policing is as a concept.
Yeah.
What is micro community policing?
Well, we developed micro community policing and the micro community policing plans in collaboration with Seattle University, working with them to make sure we wanted to have something that was grassroots, where community members were really telling us the types of problems and things that concern them. So we have about 57 neighborhoods in the city of Seattle we've identified, and we went to those neighborhoods, had through a series of meetings again through Seattle University, Dr. Jackie Helfbat and Neil Parkin, and they did surveys. They asked them, what in your neighborhood? We found that each neighborhood has its own characteristics,
Unique and different, correct?
Yeah, right. So what in your neighborhood concerns you most? And there's some similarities and there's some differences, and so we wanted to know what people really wanted their officers working on, what things that they wanted to see worked on. And once we developed that, they also developed problem-solving strategies to deal with it. For example, with car prowls, which almost every neighborhood in the city has an issue with car prowls, right. To be honest with you. Either it's one or between the first or second or third or fourth on every neighborhood. But so we want the officers working on those car prowler issues in different ways. And then as they're doing that, the officers actually log in on their computers, and they'll say, I was in this neighborhood, they had a car prowler issue, I took a report, I sent out, maybe put some flyers out, or whatever problem solving they did to help address the car prowler issue. And then we track it, so we can show how many times an officer actually worked on the issue that the neighbors identified, and is it making an impact? So that's what we want to do. We can do that, like I mentioned earlier, using technology to help us sort of decide and monitor, if you will, how we're addressing issues that have been identified. And then every quarter, Dr. Helfgott and a group of graduate students will go out and they'll re-survey the community to see if their priorities have changed, if they're the same. They also share the information about what people are saying and how much problem solving went into each of those issues.
So that goes directly back to you. They feed that data, and it's ongoing and continuous.
Yes.
We're gonna be wrapping up this section, part one. I'll say part one. Carly, we're gonna have a follow-up more, but I do want to say again, thank you very much, Chief. We're gonna move on to a break, and we're gonna continue the discussion. There's some other things that we really would like to talk about, and kind of please share with us when we get to our second part, how you got into being the Chief of Police of the Seattle Police Department. I mean, it's a story that I think is really interesting. I got bits and pieces of it the last time we talked. So anyways, you're listening to Seattle Here and Now with our very special guest, Chief of Police Carmen Best, and on Rainier Avenue Radio. .world. We will be back shortly.
Hey, John. I'm just asking if you wanted to take any of the comments.
I didn't make that.
Oh, friendly neighborhood
It's up to you.
and listen.
If you want to take
Well, we have some. We want to continue.
do what you do.
Every other
But if you wanted to engage, then
on Rainier Avenue Radio. On Politics Off the Cuff, we bring you interviews, panels, commentary, and analysis, especially for those who are fighting for progress from bottom up and from grassroots in your communities, in your neighborhood, on your block, in the city, from local to global. Join us every other week for Politics Off the Cuff here on Rainier Avenue Radio.
Hey, I'm Jalal Wilson. Check out my show, The Single Father Project, on Rainier Avenue Radio.world. I'm a single father raising my 4 children and trying to change my life in the process. My goal is to inspire other parents to do more, become more, and have fun along the way. I would love for you to check out my show, Single Father Project, on Rainier Avenue Radio.world.
This is Brenda Charles Edwards, host of Seniors Matter. Join me every week to get information on activities and issues that impact the lives of older adults and their families. That's Seniors Matter every week on Rainier Avenue Radio.
Hello, this is Sage Prince. Are you considering making lifestyle changes, eating a healthier diet, but you're not quite sure where to start? Well, I can help. Just My Opinion, a music program centered in R&B and hip-hop, but delivered in an organic, free-range music mix, providing you a nutrient-rich listening environment that can improve your mood and overall sense of well-being. So start your healthy lifestyle with healthier listening. Check out Just My Opinion with Sage Prince here on Rainier Avenue Radio.world.
This is Karen Z with Rainier Avenue Radio.world. And we want to hear from you. Our goal is to amplify and share the diverse voices of Southeast Seattle residents. Do you know of an engaged community member who should be featured in a community spotlight? Tell us about them. Do you know of an upcoming family-friendly, educational, or cultural event coming up? Tell us about it. If you have news to share, contact us by emailing rainieravenueradio.world@gmail.com. Once again, please email us at rainieravenueradio.world@gmail.com.
Welcome back to Seattle Here and Now on Rainier Avenue Radio.world. Our very special guest on this live broadcast is Chief of the Seattle Police Department, Chief Carmen Best. Chief.
Hi, John. Thank you. Thank you for letting me come back.
Welcome back with my co-host, Carly Summers.
It's great to be here as always.
So we kind of left off talking about, but I'm going to be very honest. I had this burning question that I got to ask you. When you were younger, you're young now, but when you were younger, did you ever envision that you would be the chief of police of one of the larger police departments in the country, serving 750,000 people on a daily basis? And did it ever occur to you that this is what you were going to do in the future? I mean, it's kind of a hard question to ask, but I mean, did you have any thoughts about that?
I can say when I was much younger, I'm 53 now, but when I was a young girl, that wasn't on my radar screen as a job, It's like most young people, I was first going to be a rapper and then a surgeon and all the things that we all go through, and then real life happens. But I always have had a propensity, I will say this, to give back and to work with people, always. As long as I can remember, I've been a volunteer, and I've continued to volunteer and to work on sort of civic kind of issues. So it's always been really important to me. As many people of color, like myself, there was always a little tension around police and policing, just for some very poignant and real historical reasons. So it wasn't early on one of my immediate thoughts, but I did know that I wanted to do something that involved giving back to the community. I'm the oldest of 4 children from a 2-parent family. My parents really instilled in us that the values of working hard, of having resilience, working with other people, using the golden rule. And I found that both, privately and in my profession, those very same principles have carried me through.
Now, you have children. Would you ever discuss with them about a career in law enforcement with them?
Sure, we've had those conversations. I have 2 daughters. They're both adults now, but they've chosen to go on their own career paths. So mostly what I tried to teach my children was to find your way and do what makes you happy and what works for you. Again, very pleased with my daughters. They've grown up to be lovely young women, but this wasn't the path for them. But I certainly would not have been disappointed had they chosen to be a police officer.
And your parents, growing up, I know you served in the military, Army,
yes,
correct?
Yeah, I was Army brat too. My father served and retired, and then I served right after high school.
Did they ever mention a career in law enforcement? I'm kind of digging in here. Or was it ever a discussion piece?
No, it really wasn't.
Oh.
Interestingly enough, it wasn't until I was out of the military and I had a little life experience and thought I would try something different and wanted to try to be a police officer. And didn't even know if I'd stick around, but I am really glad that I did.
Oh, we are glad too. So, you know, I have to say, the reality is this. You are a woman, chief of police. You are a woman of African-American descent, chief of police. At some point in time, there's going to be some discussion, well, she got it because. She got it because she was a woman, or she got the position because she's African-American. I know that some of that pushback is possibly out there. I'm not saying that I haven't heard it, but that's the reality of the world that we live in. How do you deflect that kind of a comment? I mean, if it ever comes at you.
Well, I really haven't heard a lot of that, to be honest with you, but I just deflect it with the truth. I'm well prepared. My qualifications are very public. They speak for themselves. I've been on this organization for 26 years. I've worked in almost every area of the police department, from patrol to investigations to management. I've been undercover officers, patrol supervisor, narcotics, robbery, gangs, precinct commander, investigations chief, interim chief of police, deputy chief, and where I am now. So I've worked all throughout the organization. I've prepared myself, both within our profession with a host of training, Police Executive Leadership Institute, Senior Management Institute for Police, the FBI National Academy. I continue to be part of a number of organizations. I'm on the Human and Civil Rights Committee for the International Association of Chiefs of Police. I'm also on the Law Enforcement Immigration Task Force, a group of law enforcement officials from across the country who really want to make sure that that it's very clear that the police department is not local authority, is not our job to work on immigration issues and that sort of thing. We want to make sure that everyone who lives in the community, whether documented or undocumented, feels safe in the community. So I spent a whole host of my time really working on these really important issues in policing and really making sure I do all that I can, not to only educate myself on our profession, but also to make sure that I am actively engaged with those service-related issues.
Weren't you just installed in an organization, United Eagle College Fund?
Yeah, I'm the chair for the United Eagle College Fund, the local chair, and also recently on the advisory board for St. Jude, and on the Visit Seattle Travel Advisory Board as well, and on the Lakeside Board.
Oh, my gosh. Yeah, when do you sleep? But, let us not forget that on your way to becoming a chief, you had the support of not only the community, the rank and file officers, as well as the guild. I mean, I can't remember a time when all three bodies supported one individual. And so that has to be an affirmation to you. And like I said, there are so many of us that are really so pleased that you made that, made it to that position, and we support that. But getting into the other aspects, what do you see? And Carly is going to chime in on this one. What do you see as the future of policing here in Seattle under your leadership? What do you see? If there's one thing that you can pick out that you want to either change or embellish or create, what would that be?
That is a really loaded question, and a really significant question, because it's hard to pick just one thing because there's so many areas. When I think about legacy, for example, like when I leave, in a few years, when my time is up, what will I want people to say? But I really hope that people say that the police are fair and just, that they really trust the officers and they feel like the officers are there to work for them. And if you can walk away with a legacy where there's a better relationship between the police and the community, particularly those communities that are disenfranchised and feel less connected to the police, that would be wonderful. That would be great. And I would love for our organization to reflect the community that we serve in a much more holistic way. I would also want to make sure that all the issues and concerns that we have, and particularly these larger issues about police shootings, de-escalation, and those issues that are really, really serious, that we have made really good inroads into that and really good insight into accountability. I know that there's a lot of concern about those types of issues, the training that we have, and our ability to better service the community, that we're using de-escalation techniques so that we don't end up in deadly force situations, that we're getting the amount of training that we need to be culturally competent, and that our implicit biases, that we know what they are, and we recognize them when we see them, and we're able to have the capacity to mitigate that when it comes up. Those things are really critical issues that, while it's been great to have what you call the honeymoon period, and I feel very, very supported, I mean, the issues are very, very serious, and they're very concerning, and I want to make sure that we're all working. The same people who got me in are going to hold me accountable to make sure that we have fair and just policing, and that is what I want to see.
Well, there are kind of, I guess, two tracks. So going back to your resume, and it does speak for itself. You have great experience. And so in some ways, the way your appointment went down, to some people, I think, in the city, and I don't mean to speak for everyone, certainly, but it almost, in some ways, seems like confirmation that the city has a way to go, that you've got this great candidate who's our interim, and she kind of gets left out of the final group, and then the mayor comes in. And I don't mean to put you on the spot about this. I know this is the mayor and the council. But it almost confirms the story that people believe about the police department, perhaps, or the city at least, and that we have a way to go here on diversity and inclusion, even just that piece. But then that this is the police department, and we want it to be reflective of the city. So can you comment a little about that?
Yeah, you know what I say, because people bring up the process and what did or what didn't happen and all the nuances. And at this point, I'm just moving forward.
Yeah.
I there's so many different aspects and opinions about what did or didn't happen. And I found over time, just in my 53 years, I'm not going to dwell on that. It's not important at this point. What really is important is how we're going to move forward and bring everybody together to have fair and just and equitable policing in the city. And that's so much more important to me than rehashing, different aspects of what went on, which I don't think any of us will know every little piece of it.
Well, I made a comment to Carly that, I think you handled it with so much class and dignity, as they say, with such great aplomb. It would have been me, man, they'd have to take me away kicking and screaming and hollering. But that's me. But I kudos to you. And that's why I respect you so much. You were, like I said, with dignity and respect. You handled that.
Yeah, I love the organization. I love the city. You know that. So what else to do but to rise up and to make sure that no matter what happened, that we were still providing the service that we need to provide. People still need to have a chief. They still need to have a police department that was, doing effective policing. So that doesn't change regardless of who's at the helm.
Well, the outcome, at least to I think everyone in this room, is amazing and great. So we're thrilled. And as we've said, it's really important for the community, and particularly I think groups who are kind of facing a disproportionate enforcement, if you will, to see someone who looks like them on the force at the helm. That is critical, and women too. As a woman, it's important to see a woman in a leadership position like this. This matters.
Yeah, sure. Well, we have a mayor that's a woman, a sheriff that's a woman, a police chief that's a woman. So it's a really great time for the city right now. And I'm excited about it, and I definitely would love to see more women coming onto the force and onto the department because we certainly could use them.
Mm-hmm. What are the kind of attributes you look for in candidates who are coming in or in people who are moving to a leadership role for this cultural competence or this kind of emotional intelligence that's required to police? And what is it? I mean, we always say it's a difficult time, or these are really interesting times, but for police in particular, at this point, it can be tricky. So
yeah, well, the thing is, even our recruiting, we've changed some of our our targeted audience, our focus on certain audiences, because it's not all car chases and gunfights and repelling out of buildings and that kind of a thing. It is really so much more about service. And I mentioned this earlier, when you deal with people on the front lines of poverty and tragedy, and so many things where your skills, your people skills, your compassion is really, really an important component of the work that we do. So we really want to make sure that as we're reaching out to folks and as we're looking at who we want to bring onto our organization, folks who are civic minded, folks who really care, who want to give back, who have maybe some social service background or other types of background, can be very helpful, you know, in that capacity. And women certainly are a big part of that. And so we want to make sure that we're bringing people up in the organization who have that, those capabilities and those skill sets.
Mm-hmm. Well, and just as you came in after service in the Army, that is one of the paths for people to move into this profession.
Sure.
It seems to be. How do you take someone who has perhaps been in active service, at least in our lifetimes, right? We've been at war for many years now. So folks have seen actual wartime active service, and they come into a police department from that experience. How do you train folks to sort of transition from that kind of mindset to more of the community policing or this community relationship?
I think that one, I would say, generally speaking, the military has done a lot of growth and evolving and changing over time. It's not the same Army that it was when I was there 30 years ago. And so they're a lot more aware about some of these social concerns as well, even the men and women who are serving the country. And I have a high level of respect and hold in high regard our veterans, absolutely. But when we bring people in, whether they have service time or not, we are looking for every aspect psychologically to make sure that people are fit to do the work. And it's really interesting because I know there's a great concern about the mindset and the type of officers that we're bringing on. And again, we want to make sure that they're service-minded, but there's more testing and more screening of police, and happy to take people through that process. But there's more psychological testing, backgrounding, checking on, you know, every aspect of a person's life before they come onto the department, so that we can ensure that the types of concerns and biases that can affect us at work, that to the degree possible that we're screening that out. Much more so than I can think of any other profession. Your teachers, your bus drivers, your doctors, the folks that you see every day don't have nearly as much screening on these issues as we do, particularly in areas of race and race relations. So you're much more likely to run across an issue in those professions, believe it or not, than you would in police. But because we have the ability to use deadly force, there's a lot more scrutiny, and there should be plenty of scrutiny on us. But so we work really hard to make sure that we get the right people in the door, that when they're here, that we're giving them the right training, that we're monitoring, looking for any indications through either early intervention systems or other avenues to make sure that the biases aren't affecting the ability to do the job justly and fairly.
I had a question. There's been a great emphasis on the opioid crisis and so on and so forth. It is a serious problem, but we also have many more issues in our society. This whole spate of domestic violence is a major issue, and I think I talked to before the show. We'll be covering that in the month of October. It's Domestic Violence Awareness Month. You have an office and you have designated staff to deal with domestic violence, correct, in the department?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we know that it's a national issue and certainly a local issue as well, violence in the home. And it's such a pervasive issue in terms of when people are affected by it, you know, the lasting effects are long term. So we want to make sure that we can get in and help, you know, men and women when they're in those violent situations. We've also created an ERPO team that comes in and they can secure handguns out of the homes of people who we think have violent tendencies, either towards themselves or others. So that's Extreme Risk Protection Order service. And we do that because we find that it's really important that men and women and children in a home, we want to make sure they feel as safe as possible.
Yeah, I'm not going to make a statement about the availability of guns, but we know that is a problem in the home. If it's tied to an incident, well, it's like a 80% of the time, if there's a gun in the home and it gets used against a family member. I think that's still a statistic that's, as they say, is god awful, but that is a fact. The ability to get firearms and hold on to them. And I was looking your extreme risk protection orders. I mean, that's a very big step forward. You know?
Yeah. And again, it's used as a way to minimize the ability of someone who really is in crisis to hurt someone else or to hurt themselves. And it goes through a due process with a judge that makes a determination, and there's an appeal process as well. So we're not just coming in taking the guns away, so to speak. I mean, there is a process for this. But again, the impetus for it is to make sure that you're protecting, the people in the community.
And what about, education programs? I know that I've met several officers, we call them school resource officers, that work in several of the schools. They're not in every school, though. Is that correct?
No, I mean, as you know, we have to really be thoughtful about how we deploy our resources. But we put officers in the schools that we know where there has been a lot of violence in the area, or where people are from homes where there have been more violence or gang activity. I mean, that was really important that we had that level of intervention. And our school officers, there's all this talk about, a valid conversation, I should say, about the school to prison pipeline. But we really made a very intentional, deliberate effort to make sure our officers aren't part of that process. The ones that are assigned to the schools are there to really work with young people, to help them. If they get in trouble in school and they're expelled from school, there's a high probability that they're not going to get back in school and they're going to become, have a problematic life. But if we can have officers there, those officers help. Sometimes they help with just being there so they can have in-house detention, so that they're able to continue their education while they're, pay back whatever it is that they've done wrong. We find it really important to have the officers at the school. They also, many of them are involved in mentoring programs. We have about 50 kids or so, mostly males of color, that we've taken the officers through training, so they're not just matching anybody up, but officers have actually been trained on mentorship to help with the problem that we want to make sure that we have less of our young men of color engaged in the criminal justice system. So we want to be a part of the solution. We know we're not going to work our way out of a job. We just want to make sure that we're doing all that we can to make it safe for everybody.
So if you had the resources, I think you would probably really give it a very hard thought about, not a hard thought, but consider putting an officer in every school if it's possible.
Yeah, it'd be great if we had that luxury.
Yeah.
But first and foremost, crime fighting, response to 911. So we're always balancing, every aspect of intervention, prevention, but also we have to do the enforcement part of it too.
Well, let me put in a plug. The resource officers I work with, having been a school administrator, they do an excellent job. They do more to prevent things from happening, and they've got a pipeline with the kids, and that's the key. And I think they should be lauded and recognized for the great effort, because it is a different context when you go to a school, a high school or a middle school. In these days and times and work with kids, it is a different time and place in our society. So that's very good for them.
We talked a little bit about, we'll give you a little bit more time on kind of goals and what your vision is. You talked a little bit about that, but this is, Rainier Avenue Radio .world. So maybe you can talk about our area specifically and what you see as some of the focus areas and kind of where we'd like to see things move on policing in this area.
Well, sure. I used to be the South Precinct Commander for a short time. I love this area of the city and really liked working there and met a whole host of really wonderful folks. But one of the issues that we want to make sure we're doing really well on is ensuring that, like, shots fired. South Seattle has had the highest, did have the highest number of shots fired in the city. That number has been reduced greatly through a lot of effort from both community and from the officers and from investigations to make sure that the very small number of folks who are comfortable shooting and firing, that they go to jail actually, and that they're not doing that. And we've noticed we've had a really major decrease in the number of shots fired in the city. It's very concerning to people when they live in a neighborhood They have children here. There are parks here. It's a wonderful place to visit, to play, to do things. But if you're not feeling safe, if you feel like there might be gunshots or whatever, then that's a problem. So we want to make sure that we're doing everything we can to work on that issue in particular, so that people feel safe. There's also a whole host of people who are very concerned about traffic issues and speeding and just the normal things that come up in any neighborhood, but certainly they come up in South Seattle quite a bit because of Rainier, and people tend to not want to obey the speed limit. So we want to make sure that we have as much visibility into that and enforcement as we can. Again, it's only to make sure that people are kept safe.
You're listening to Seattle Here and Now on Rainier Avenue Radio.world with our very special guest, Chief Carmen Best, Seattle Police Department Chief of Police, and my co-host Carly Summers. We're going to continue the discussion towards the end of the show, but I have to ask this. I'm interested in helping. I'm interested in volunteering. I want to get involved. How can I help and assist, or is there a way for me to work with the police department in my community? What can I do? I'm burning to do this.
Great, John. I'll look for you. So, some of the things I think that can be really helpful. We have a victim support team.
Okay.
And that is a team that goes out and they help with domestic violence cases. They help either transport young people or get victims into shelters or provide them services that they need and information about that. And we have about 80 volunteers there, and we utilize them, fairly frequently. I can remember when they first came into existence, about 2 decades or so ago, thereabouts, and officers were saying, we're not going to give these civilians radios and let them come out with us. And they didn't like the idea. But now when I hear them on the radio, they're asking for them all the time. They're really glad that they're there. So it's really taken a turn. So that's one way. And of course, just being, engaging. And we have a whole host of ethnic and particular advisory councils.
Right.
And we love people to participate in our advisory council meetings and located on our website. So you can come out, share information and help us as we're making connections with people in the community. So those are some volunteering efforts that we think are important.
And your thought is to continue with those advisory councils?
Absolutely. We want to make sure they ebb and they wane and they ebb back and forth, but we've always kept them. We think it's really important that we have a place where people can come and share their concerns and their ideas and their thoughts about the police department.
Mm-hmm.
We only have just a couple minutes left, but maybe you can talk about, we've left you about 2 minutes to talk about sort of what, more generally, kind of what your plans are outside of the Rainier, and outside of the Rainier Valley and goals, and if you want to tell us how we can help, let us know that too.
Yeah, sure. Well, first and foremost, one of the things that we're really working on is our hiring and staffing. I think you asked about it earlier, Carly, with recruiting. Recruiting is so very important. If you want a police department that reflects the community, a police department that you trust, and you want to have good people in it, help us get those people. We're recruiting, we're hiring. We want to bring in people, that are competent, that care about the community, and want to serve. And it's really important that we get, high quality, high competency folks in.
Go to your site. You have a website under City of Seattle. Yeah. And the police department does, and you do have a section.
Yeah, it's we have cityofseattle.gov/police, and then we also have a recruiting site. I'll have to get that the address there because it's not on top of my tongue at this moment. But if you go to the police department website, you will find it on there.
We are Seattle Here and Now with our special guest, Chief Carmen Best on Rainier Avenue Radio.world. We're going to be wrapping this up. Again, we cannot thank you enough for spending the time. And as I said, we are honored and humbled that you are here. And thank you very much, Carly, being my co-host with the most. And we look forward to having further discussions and bringing you on again and talking about some of the positive things that you've been doing. We can't, again, thank you enough for your time and appreciate your, again, showing and appearing on this live broadcast. And it's new for us. Actually, it's new for me. I don't know about you. You've been several places, and I was there at your installation at the African American Academy as well represented. So we're going to wrap up this session or this section of Rainier Avenue Radio.org, the show Seattle Here Now. I am your host, John Yasutake, and again, this was a live broadcast with our very special guest, Chief Carmen Best of the Seattle Police Department, and Carly Summers, my co-host. Chief, any real quick last word?
We're hiring, SeattlePoliceJobs.com. John, Carly, thank you so much for having me.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Taking so much time with this. I know you've got a really busy schedule, so.
I'm glad you listened to one of the training.